Welcome back to the channel, everybody. And today it's my number 2 team in my 2023 NFL Deep Dive Series, the defending Super Bowl champion, Kansas City Chiefs. Make sure to hit the like and leave a comment in the comment section below. It's the one thing that helps out with the algorithms more than anything else, get the views up and really help my channel out. Get into the home stretch here. Please subscribe as we get towards the regular season. Just about to start, and the Chiefs, they're that team that last year I think they proved it, going on the run they did to win the Super Bowl, that without Tyreek Hill, I think people thought this offense and the team in general would really struggle. And at times it looked like they did, that they didn't have that really home run, break your opponent's back threat, but they just stayed consistent. They stayed sharp mentally, and they kept putting themselves in positions to play to their strengths. And that's something that this team has done as well, if not better, than anyone over the last 5 years. Of course, 5 trips in a row now to the AFC Championship game, including 3 Super Bowl appearances and 2 wins. Just a phenomenally run organization. They do things very differently than it seems other teams do. They're probably the only team that with a level of success does a wide receiver by committee strategy, which we saw them implement last year when they lost Tyreek Hill and they didn't really have anyone else. Travis Kelce maintains himself as the focal point of the offense in the passing game. Isaiah Pacheco came out of nowhere. He's going to pick up that running back one, but maybe not to a degree that you'd see other running back ones. I still think there's going to be a bit of a committee aspect to that as well. They maintain the best interior offensive line in the NFL, by my estimation. They got 2 brand new tackles with veteran status. The defense is a bit of a concern. You know, that run defense I think is going to be an issue. But again, because of how great the coaching staff is, they constantly put that defense in a position to play to their strengths, which will be in pass coverage. If they do get in a situation where they have to run defend, I think it's going to be a bit of an issue. There's still questions around Chris Jones's contract and what that looks like, at least as of this recording. And I'm going to show you throughout this video just how significant getting that contract done before Thursday is going to be to them moving forward, and how it really does change the overall look of that front four in particular in both passing and run defense. They drafted for 2 years in a row now a defensive end with a little bit of upside, needs some development time. But that's going to be really on Steve Spagnuolo. They got a brand new offensive coordinator. They let Eric Bieniemy go, which personally I don't think is that big of a deal. You can go back and watch my Washington Commanders video to show how much of a big deal I don't think it is. And I don't think it's even that big of a deal because they got Matt Nagy, and I know he's got a bad name in the football community because of his run in Chicago. But, you know, if you know anything about the game, you know coordinators, position coaches, head coaching, 3 completely different jobs. So I really like what they got in him, and it's because Andy Reid, in particular, runs a great system. And it's really his system and his culture that drives this team forward, and I think you're going to see them not miss a beat. They didn't miss a beat without Tyreek Hill, and they won't miss a beat without Eric Bieniemy either. They're a legitimate Super Bowl contender. It's really in the AFC. It's them, the Bengals, the Bills, and then maybe like the Dolphins or the Jets. We'll have to see how those 2 teams work out. But in terms of level of consistency, there's 3 teams who have showed over the last couple of years that they're the ones. Shout Roman Reigns. So let's get right into it. We'll start with the coaching staff and why I still think this is an elite level staff. So this is my number 1 coaching staff in the entire league right now. I do think, based on what we've seen over the last couple of years, that it's safe to say Andy Reid may have supplanted in the present time Bill Belichick as being the top head coach in football. And I think that stands to reason the way that he's conducted himself since coming to Kansas City. Towards the end of his run in Philadelphia, it wasn't, he didn't feel like he was stepping up to the level he needed to. And then he got immediately moved to Kansas City, revitalized Alex Smith's career, got Patrick Mahomes, got Travis Kelce to being at the level that he's at, and has schemed around players who don't necessarily have like top level talents other than really Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. He's done a great job of producing and coaching up these guys who were these day 2, even day 3, late day 3 picks on both sides of the football. And he's put a coaching staff in place that's really turned out some high quality here. And we'll start with the new offensive coordinator, Matt Nagy, who's taking over for Eric Bieniemy, who's gone, who, like I said, I don't think is that big of a deal. And to me, Matt Nagy is sort of the same ilk as Bill O'Brien, where he gets a lot of flack and a lot of online hatred from really people who don't understand the game. People don't understand the nuances of coaching and the roles of coaches and whatnot, because he didn't do a great job with Mitchell Trubisky in Chicago. And that people take that and they dismiss him now as being like not a good coach, which is very odd because he got that job from being a good coach with Andy Reid before. So him getting into this role, again, to me, it's really the same Eric Bieniemy stuff where you're running Andy Reid's offense. It's a well-oiled machine at this point, and because you have Patrick Mahomes, you've really got a playbook that's so wide open. You can be so creative. You got such high IQ players. That's another thing that they do really well, is they really teach these guys the nuances of the game. So in that way, in the middle of a game, they can just draw up a play that they've never practiced, and they'll run it at the goal line inside the 5-yard line, and it'll score a touchdown. And it's just, and to put him in this role, I think that he's going to learn a lot also, even though he was on this coaching staff last year, and I think he's been on the coaching staff ever since he left Chicago 2 years ago. Or was it last year? 2 years ago. And I think he's got a real opportunity here to revitalize his prospects of being a head football coach. I don't think that run for him is necessarily over. I just think that what happened in Chicago was, him maybe not being ready. And I think getting this second run here will maybe thrust him into a situation where he'll be ready down the line, or at least to the point where a team will be willing to give him the opportunity to do so. And then on the defense side of the ball, Steve Spagnuolo, as a Giants fan, I'm very biased to Spags. Super Bowl winning defensive coordinator. And he's done a really good job since coming to Kansas City, working with guys who aren't necessarily, like I said, like the most blue chip talent. Really, other than Chris Jones, who turned into that, this defense hasn't really been operating with that level of talent all that often. They had Honey Badger for a little bit there, but, like L'Jarius Sneed, Nick Bolton, Willie Gay. Like, these are guys who are like these day 2 picks. You got Trent McDuffie, who's a first round pick, who's working out quite well. But then you got Jalen Watson, who was a rookie last year as well. Sort of gets forgotten to a degree because of how well the development of everyone else went. George Karlaftis coming into his second year, he really fits that mold of Spagnuolo, and how he advances in the run game is going to be something to watch. But Spagnuolo is notoriously very aggressive, and that works out when you also focus on developing the football IQs of your players. And that comes, again, from Andy Reid. And that's really the reason why this is my number one staff, is because they really focus on the IQ aspect, and then they empower their players to be creative and to use the tools that they teach them strategy-wise, more so than just X's and O's and like the physical aspect of the game. Like when you see like indie periods and like footwork drills and all that, like so many people put so much emphasis on that, when the reality is, once you get to a certain level of professionalism, unless you're dealing with an uber raw talent, getting them smart to the game rather than in worrying about so much the physical aspect of it can end up working out really well in your favor, especially if they have the physical tools already. So you have Patrick Mahomes, who had the physical tools coming in, and he sat out a whole year just really focusing on what was going on in the classroom aspect. And that's how Andy Reid's really built this team, where they're as close to a dynasty as what we have in the NFL now. 5 straight AFC Championship games for Andy Reid, 3 Super Bowl appearances, won it last year, and potentially could win it again this year, despite the strength of the conference and their division. And it's because above anything else, they're going to come prepared for each opponent as good, if not better, than anyone else in the entire league week in and week out. And they're going to be showing up with new plays. They're going to be showing up with things you haven't seen before that you couldn't study on film because it wasn't part of their offense or their defensive strategy the week prior, or the week prior to that, or the week prior to that. So it's going to take a lot of effort in the positional meetings, in the offensive meeting room, in the defensive meeting room, in order to put yourself in a position where you can even beat this team, because they're going to be so far ahead of you already in the mental aspect of the game because of this staff. So let's run it through here. The positions: quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, he gets a 92. He's, again, I said it in the last video, he's top 3 quarterback at minimum. You can say he's the best. You can say, him, Burrow, and Josh Allen really have taken that mantle over the last couple of years. Maybe I'd be more inclined to say that he's the best because he has a bigger resume than the other two. Playing on such a high level of consistency, how he played last year through some injuries in the playoffs, especially in the Super Bowl, he really showed up, and he's the big reason why this team not only succeeds on offense, but it's that success on the offense led by him that really keeps them in a lot of games, because he's so good, he's so creative, he's so dynamic, and he makes everyone around him better. He's really and truly one of those quarterbacks. You could see it last year. They lost Tyreek Hill. They didn't really have a number 1 receiver on the roster at that point. They had Travis Kelce, but other than that, it's him having to elevate guys who were not viewed as top level guys, who on any other team at best would have been wide receiver 3s, running back 2s, running back 3s. He was playing with all those guys, but with Travis Kelce, and he was able to make everyone else better. And that does have to go to the coaching staff as well, but once you're on the field and you're playing, that's on him. And his ability to do that is absolutely astonishing, and he's the best at it. Because Joe Burrow, he's had Jamar Chase. Josh Allen, he's had Stephon Diggs. And you can say Travis Kelce, okay, but to not have like that outside receiver last year that you could just trust to throw the ball up to with a 50-50 ball, who's going to run great routes on the outside like Stephon Diggs would, who's going to be just an all-around, super threat the way Jamar Chase is. Even like a guy like A.J. Brown, who's like this big physical threat on the outside, to not have that, to just really have a guy in between the numbers, up the seams, it really speaks to how much focus he puts into being on the same page with these guys. And it harps back to the football IQ aspect of how they're coached, that all these guys are always on the same page at all times, and that you can put guys out there that are more traitsy than necessarily high-level talents, right? Like you can put an overall average guy out there, but it's okay, this guy's our speed guy. The only thing he's good for is his speed, but that's why he's out there. We got this guy who's going to be like our gadget guy, big motion, big quick routes, all that, tricky, quick. That's that guy. He's not going to do anything else, but that's who he is. And this is our jump ball guy, our physical threat down the field. He's not going to do anything else, but that's what he is. And Mahomes will figure out when the right opportunity is to use those guys. And he'll go out there and he'll extend plays and really get around some of the offensive line deficiencies. There's really just nobody else like him right now in the entire game. He could work on maybe, some accuracy stuff sometimes. There is the thing where he tries to do too much. But it's also those things, those traits and those instincts that make him so great as well. So you don't want to turn that aspect of his brain off, because I think then you would lose a lot of what makes him great and what makes the team great in general. So even though he doesn't really run the way you would see a Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts or Daniel Jones or even Josh Allen, Mahomes still brings a tremendous threat in the run game as well. You always have to account for him as as a defense, because he can tuck in and run. He can. We've seen him do it so many times. He's got those like little quick steps where he's like weaving in and out, and it's like doesn't look like he's really moving all that fast, but he's getting away from people. And he's making big plays with his feet when he has to. Now, sort of like what we've seen with Aaron Rodgers over the years, he dials it down seemingly every year as he gets more comfortable as a pocket passer and is able to use his arm talent more comfortably. We saw that with Aaron Rodgers throughout his career, to the point where Aaron Rodgers doesn't like run at all anymore. And some of that has to do with age, but he was doing that when he was probably still a much better athlete and a lot younger and a lot less banged up than he is now. And I think that's what we're seeing with Mahomes, and that's an invaluable trait to have, is have somebody like Mahomes who can make such a great impact if you need him to, but not have to. Like let him use his arm more often, and then you get some backs that can complement him as well. Isaiah Pacheco came out of nowhere last year, and the one thing that he showed that I think was the reason why he dropped to day 3, because people didn't necessarily believe he could be that turnaround and hand the ball off running back. They thought that he was going to be just like a situational third down receiving back, change of pace back. And he turned out to be so much more than that. And I look for him to be even more than that this year. They didn't go out and draft a running back. They're only carrying 3 running backs right now, including Clyde Edwards-Helaire probably in his last year with the team. Jerick McKinnon will get into the receiving back aspect now. Pacheco and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, they're all in the receiving game. They're all sort of interchangeable to a degree. They all bring something a little bit different. McKinnon, is like, that's really what his best feature is. He's not an A turnaround and hand the ball off running back, but he will have really big moments in games every now and then because of the impact he can make in the receiving game. He'll make guys miss. He'll outrun linebackers. He'll outstrength safeties every now and then. You got Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Pacheco. What really lifts them up in the receiving back aspect, Clyde Edwards-Helaire in particular, is that he does have a little bit more to him as a straight up running back. I do think Pacheco is better in all aspects than anyone on the roster, but I don't expect Clyde Edwards-Helaire to not get opportunities. And I don't expect Jerick McKinnon to not get opportunities. I think that we could see a situation where, we're looking at like a 55% workload for Pacheco, like a good 30%, 35% for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and then the rest go to Jerick McKinnon. Whatever percentage of that is left over. I think, and because they're only carrying 3 guys, I feel like that's a way to sort of keep everybody healthy, keep everybody fresh throughout the season. It's a very interesting decision to only carry 3 backs, but I think it speaks to what this offense is really going to do. I think you could see when we get into the receivers, Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney maybe will take on some sort of receiving back role throughout games as well, just to get other guys like that on the field. Guys that you can just sort of lob the ball out to on a quick screen or even hand it off to them in like a read option RPO situation, and they can weave in and out of these holes in defenders and use their quickness. I think that that's a possibility as well that we could see throughout the year, which is why they probably only kept 3 backs. But don't expect this team to all of a sudden be like some big running team or anything like that. A lot of what they're going to be doing is based off the passing game first. They'll probably be, I don't know if they were last year. I feel like they have been, at least over the last couple of years, throw the ball more than any other team, whether it be as extensions of the run game or not. I definitely expect that to happen and have these backs all sort of be interchangeable in that scenario, with Pacheco and Clyde Edwards-Helaire sort of taking up the mantle as the first and second down backs when you do want to run the ball. And I think that they have the ability, especially with the offensive line play that we'll get to eventually as well, that they'll have the ability to put games away in that sense. And it won't be a situation where they're going to be incapable of running the football. They're more in a situation that their passing game is so incredibly effective that the run game naturally will come secondary, because it's what's just best for the team week in and week out. So now we'll get to the receivers and the tight ends, and we'll start with Travis Kelce, the tight end, because he's really the only sure thing in this passing game. some teams do running back by committee, and they do this to a degree as well. But they're also one of the few teams that go wide receiver by committee, it seems. Travis Kelce has his spot. He's going to get 100 catches. He's going to get over 1,000 yards, and he's going to get double-digit touchdowns. That's what he does. And him and Mahomes are so dialed in together that it's just naturally what they're going to do. But they've put themselves in a situation now with the receivers in particular where they're going to be able to ride the hot hand. The best guys are going to play. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier about this guy has this particular trait, this guy has this particular trait, this guy has this particular trait, and this is what they do. And we're going to use that, and we're not going to try and put them necessarily in situations where it doesn't suit them. You'll see a lot of teams that will put certain receivers or certain tight ends in, or certain running backs in situations that they're not really made to be in. So they kind of lose a little bit of what they could possibly get just because they want the quote-unquote best overall guy on the field. But if we were going to go with the best overall guy, it's almost Richie James, maybe the rookie Rashee Rice, who they just drafted, because they rank actually pretty high. Richie James had quietly a really good year with the Giants. Even though it didn't pop statistically, the opportunities he did get, he really took advantage of. I think he had some drop issues, in my opinion. I don't know how that worked out with other grading systems, but his drops really did affect that. If he can clean that up, then I think he could be really effective in the short to intermediate areas and to extend plays run after catch. Rashee Rice is going to be sort of have his role carved out as a bigger guy in this offense. Sky Moore, who they drafted last year, you expect him to step up a little bit, but then they traded for Kadarius Toney, who him and Sky Moore are almost in the same spirit, so to speak, in terms of what their role is, and that's why I said you probably see them like getting mixed and matched in the backfield even, and running jet sweeps and the options and all that. And then Justin Ross, who came along here in this preseason, who may end up working his way to get some opportunities. It's a matter of him staying healthy. He did have all those injury concerns at Clemson, which really screwed up his draft stock because he was so dominant there early on. He had wide receiver 1 written all over him, then just injuries just piled up on him. Marcus Valdes-Scantling is just that full speed ahead guy, but kind of like Richie James, you're kind of worried about the hands, which could affect how often he's on the field, especially now when you get a guy like Rashee Rice out there. And you would think that Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney are going to get more opportunities. Justin Ross might get more opportunities. So Valdes-Scantling might end up being like more of just a backup to everybody and maybe not see the field as much as he initially thought last year when he signed with the team. They don't really have depth at the tight end position either. They only kept 3 tight ends, including Kelce. But Kelsey's going to fill that role for as long as he's healthy the entire game. Like, he's not going to be somebody that's going to come off the field for the offense unless the game is well in hand and they're not just trying to pick up some meaningless injury late in a game. But this wide receiver by committee strategy that we're seeing them implement with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They kept 7 wide receivers. To me, that shows that they're going to be having a really healthy competition, really healthy rotation, and they got guys that they really like and are going to try to execute those traits situationally throughout the year, which to me also, I'd say in a fantasy football sense, makes every single receiver on this team untouchable. Like, you can't really pick one up. You gotta sort of wait to see which one's going to break out and hope that you got a good waiver wire position. But really the only ones, Mahomes and Kelce, are the ones that you're going to rely on in that sense. And then throughout the year, I think that there's a world where the second half of the season, we might see Justin Ross be a top receiving threat for them. We could have weeks at a time where Kadarius Toney or Sky Moore are just dominating teams because of the matchups. Rashee Rice and Richie James might just come in due to efficiency, or they want like a little sneaky route runner, so they throw out Richie James. There's so many aspects that they can go with here, which, again, in any other team, you'd be like, this is a terrible receiver group. But because of how they run this offense and because of the quarterback they have, it's actually a really deep receiving group. Just no real sign of a top-end guy. Now let's get to the offensive line. We'll start with the pass blocking. They brought in 2 brand new tackles, Jawan Taylor from Jacksonville and Donovan Smith from the Bucks. It was an interesting decision. They lost Orlando Brown in free agency. They didn't want to pay him. They paid Jawan Taylor instead. And then they didn't really go out and draft a tackle the way many people expected them to. They settled on the veteran Donovan Smith, who has been like that middle of the pack tackle for a long time. He did well with Tampa and Brady, but they were always sort of talking about replacing him. It was always on the periphery there in Tampa, and I think the injuries made that a little easier. Jawan Taylor really had his breakout, last year for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and he's hoping to continue that trend now. He's certainly in an offense where it's going to help hide some of his deficiencies. That there's not going to be too many scenarios where he's going to have to be, I think, super special because he's got Patrick Mahomes back there who's just pocket presence is amazing. His escapability is amazing. So it probably won't be a situation where he gives up a whole lot of sacks. The pressures are going to be a different story altogether. But they do have, I would say, the best interior offensive line in the game with Creed Humphrey there in the middle. One of the best pass blocking guys, probably the best run blocking guy. We'll get to that center in the league. So great. An absolute bargain of a steal in that draft where the Packers took Josh Myers. I think it was a 1 pick before him, which laughable. It's almost like Jalen Reagor going before Justin Jefferson. Then they got Joe Thuney, who they brought in the draft. They stole Trey Smith. In that same draft, they got Creed Humphrey as a late round pick because there was concerns about his health coming out of Tennessee. So they took a flyer on him, a guy without those injury concerns and that health concern would have been probably an early day 2 pick. So they really stole that, and his health has held up. Not getting much in the passing game from him, but to have him be your worst pass blocker coming out, that is the sign of a really good offensive line. Joe Thuney is really great. Creed Humphrey's really great at picking up blitzes, directing the rest of the offensive linemen with mic identification and blitz identification and all the other roles that a center sort of has to take on. And then to have 2 veteran tackles as well. Not the greatest tackles that you could find, but there's not necessarily a weak link on this offensive line, at least on site. You look at some of the depth pieces here, this is sort of where it comes in. They got Lucas Niang, who's sort of their swing tackle at this point, and then Wanya Morris, who was a draft pick out of Oklahoma, who, he's also maybe a swing tackle, maybe like a fourth and a third guard on the roster that'll play. Maybe Nick Allegretti will end up taking up that role probably more, at least in this year, unless Wanya Morris specifically steps up significantly. But they not a lot of great depth, but the top heaviness of the offensive line is actually quite good. Now we take a look at the run blocking, and the tackles do take a step down. They're not particularly great run blockers. Their specialties have been in the passing game, but that's really by design. That's why they probably were brought in, because of, like we talked about earlier, this is such a pass-first team anyway, that you just need serviceable run blocking from your tackles to just sort of keep the run game functioning, especially when you have an interior offensive line that is, again, elite at this. Creed Humphrey, an absolutely phenomenal run blocker, maybe the best at his position. Trey Smith, fantastic at that as well, takes a giant leap up. Thuney takes a bit of a step down, but he's still in the top. He's still a top level guard, even in run blocking. Just phenomenal talent that they put together there in the interior. That's really going to help out. And when you get your 2 tackles there, the weak links there that aren't even really that terrible at it, and with how little you are going to be running the ball throughout the year, this is going to allow the run game to stay functional, to maybe statistically still end up in the top, half of the league. In terms of the depth does improve slightly here. Niang, not as good, sort of the same story as the other tackles. Wanya Morris is better in the run game. Allegretti is better in the run game as well. So I think that the depth is an interesting thing here. It's really a 3-man group. They kept 10 offensive linemen. you got 3 serviceable depth pieces here. That, again, your coaching staff is so good. You'll be able to strategize around an injury if it happens, especially at the tackle position. I think if I'd be more concerned if I lost a Joe Tooney or a Creed Humphrey at this point, because their role is so significant in at least one aspect of the offense that I think that's where you would see a significant step back. But I think when you have Wanya Morris and Lucas Niang, who used to be a starter, he was a starter I think his rookie year or his second year in the league. He's very familiar with the offense, though. Wouldn't take a whole lot to put him in there and let him be at least serviceable. You know he won't get lost out there. You at least know that he knows exactly what his assignment will be at all times. So it's decent depth pieces to have. So running over the positional summaries, you got one of the best quarterbacks in the league, probably the best tight end in the league. Your pass blocking, really good. Even getting to the run game, just solid play really in the run game, which is really all you need in this offense. Obviously, there's parts of the offensive line you don't want to lose, but I think that's true for really any team in the league. And you got some okay depth pieces there that could fill in need be. The only one that I'd really be overly concerned that you lose is obviously Mahomes and Travis Kelce. Those are really the 2 key cogs in this offense, where if you lost one of them, it would hurt the way the offense functions significantly. I think everybody else, especially in the receiver room, in the running back room, it's so by committee. They got 10 guys between the running backs and the receivers that they can, I think, get a lot of production out of interchangeably. So we take a look here. It is the best offense in the league by far. I don't know if there's any other overall grade that got over 80 for me as an average score, but it is the best passing offense. They're the 17th rush offense, which again, based upon how they run this, that's all you really need. You don't need a top 10 running offense. When you got such a great pass offense, the 3rd best offense in the league, and it's really tight for me between like Philly and Baltimore. Baltimore sort of has the opposite problem that Kansas City has. Philadelphia is a little bit more balanced. So it's sort of like you got the three different types of offenses sort of bookending each other there at the top 3 for me. But they have the 3rd offense, but they could have statistically the best offense in the league by the end of the year, because they'll have close to a 5,000-yard passer, and then they'll have such a mix and match in the run game that there's no reason why this couldn't be a close to 7,000-yard total offense by the end of the year. Now we're going to talk about the defense, and we'll start here with the defensive line and the pass rush, and we'll start with really the 2 best guys they have coming into the year, because there's no guarantee these guys are going to be on the field. We know Charles Omenihu is actually going to be out the first, I think, 4, 5, or 6 games, depending. I forget which one is how long his suspension was for. I think it was 6 games. So we're not going to see him in those first 6 games, but he is coming in as probably your best pass rusher off the edge. You hope that the rookie there, George Karlaftis, who's going to be a starter, obviously first-round pick last year, you hope that he can develop. They used the first-round pick on Felix Enuduke Uzoma, who I was not very high on at all, and I think it's going to be reflected in my grades that you'll see shortly. But I feel like he was taken as almost like a developmental project, like a high upside guy who's maybe doesn't have the skills right now, but you draft him for what you think he can be based upon physical traits. Keandre Coburn, who they drafted this year, I think that he is going to get a gigantic opportunity this year to get a lot of snaps, especially depending on how long Chris Jones is out for. As of right now, as of the recording of this, he has not agreed to a contract extension. The talks are happening. I think they get it done before the first game of the year against the Lions. I really do. I think that it's impossible to not field this guy because of how significant he is to this front forward. Look how much he elevates this group just with his tremendous ability. And you can put him at a defensive end position if you want to on early down. There's so much you can do with him. He's really he's up there with, Dexter Lawrence at this point of maybe getting close to supplanting Aaron Donald as the best interior defensive lineman in the league. Especially if Aaron Donald doesn't, continue sort of like a downward trend in play, even though he was at such a high level that even the downward trend still had him as maybe number one, if not number two or number three at worst. But Chris Jones is really in that position right now where he can take that over. We'll see how this contract situation works out. But in terms of their edge depth, you can see there, I'm not really that high on Uzomah right now. I think his potential is pretty good. But it's just weird. It was just a weird choice to me, considering you could have taken a tackle. Instead, maybe they felt too many tackles that come off the board at that point, which is fair enough. Mike Dana, I think early in the year, he'll be the starter opposite of Karlaftis. And then Uzomah is going to get opportunities through the first 6 games to establish himself while Charles Omenihu is out. Malik Herring not really going to contribute all that much. But this is where now you're going to see there's a huge issue, for me at least, with Chris Jones not being on the field. Your rookie, Keandre Colburn, is your next best option to him, and there's no guarantee that Colburn's going to be able to translate into the NFL. So you got Tashawn Wharton and Derek Nandy and Neil Farrell, who they just got from the Raiders in a trade. I think it was like they swapped like 7th round picks or something like that. So who's going to step up if Chris Jones isn't there? And this is why you have to get that contract done. Now we look at the defensive line against the run, and this is where Charles Omenihu being out the first 6 weeks is going to stand significant damage to this team. And especially if you don't get Chris Jones signed, who you can then kick out to a defensive end, there's going to be real issues, I think, early with this defensive line, unless you get George Karlaftis to really step up with the defensive ends, in particular, stopping the run and being good run support guys. And so I think it's going to make the job that much harder for the interior. Still the 2 best interior guys by my estimation, Chris Jones and Keandre Colburn. So you got to get Chris Jones on the field, especially with Omenihu out. And then at least 6 games into the year, Omenihu's going to be back, and you'll be able to maybe have a big set with Chris Jones playing defensive end. I would be a lot more concerned about this if their offense wasn't so powerful, because they're going to score so many points that I don't think teams are going to be necessarily in a position to feel like they can run the ball against them. Because if this defensive line does improve, then these teams are going to be playing from behind and not being able to advance the ball, and they're going to lose a lot of games to the Chiefs. So the Chiefs are going to keep them in a position where the teams are going to have to be passing against them, and that's a huge advantage because of how brutal, to me, this front four could be, at least in the first 6 weeks with Omenihu out, because then who's going to step in and play a defensive end? It's going to be Mike Dana? Mike Dana and George Karlaftis, they weren't good last year against the run at all. Anaduke Uzomah wasn't that good either against the run in college. So something needs to be changed there with this defensive end group. Do you put a linebacker as more of like a big defensive end to sort of make up for this? Because you do have good linebackers, but just a whole lot of nothing outside of your top 4 guys for the pass rush. And you really got 3 guys who could be good to serviceable run defenders. So there's going to have to be guys who have to step up here and really develop and really take a step or 2 forward in their abilities in the run game. Or in games where this offense might not be producing, which won't be that often. But if they do, teams, I think, will be able to run the clock out on the Chiefs offense, on the Chiefs team, just because of how poor this front four is potentially going to be against the run. Chris Jones will have to really get him out. You're going to have to really get him out there. He's going to have to take over in those situations. So now let's go to the linebackers. And this might be the deepest group that they have position group-wise on this defense. They only kept 4 guys. But, Nick Bolton is probably their all-purpose 3-down linebacker. You're going to see him out there the most. He had a great year last year. They signed Drew Tranquill to come in. I think this is going to be when he's going to play, is going to be in these passing situations next to Nick Bolton. But the other linebackers on their team also are going to get a lot of reps as well. So if Tranquill, struggles or gets injured, they got Willie Gay and Leo Chanel, who they drafted last year, who are really quite good in every aspect of playing linebacker as well. They've done a great job of getting a really balanced linebacker group here. Only kept 4 guys, kind of like with the running back group. They only kept 3, so they only kept 4 linebackers as of right now. but they're all guys that they'll be comfortable putting on the field. Even in the run game, Bolton does take a step up. You see Leo Chanel, that's where his game really is better, but he's also got like a bit of that Nick Bolton in him as well, where he's got some balance to his game. So he, for all intents and purposes, could end up by the end of the year being the linebacker that gets probably the second most amount of snaps. Even with Willie Gay, who probably will be that linebacker 3 for them. And Drew Trank will probably be situational for the passing game. So even though he is probably one of the best linebackers in passing situations, he might still end up being the linebacker that gets the 4th amount of snaps, just because Chanel and Bolton have so much more balance to their game, and they might want to have better run defenders out there to make up for the deficiencies they have on the front 4 against the run, and they won't really lose all that much in the passing game by having Chanel out there instead of Tranquil even in passing situations, if that makes sense. Now let's go to the pass coverage, and this is a young group that I really, really like. That's only going to continuously get better. Are they right now the top group in the league? No, but they could be by the end of this year as they continue to develop. L'Jarius Sneed, Trent McDuffie, Jalen Watson, a really good young group there at corner. I think McDuffie and Watson were rookies last year. L'Jarius Sneed, I think, is going into his contract year, if I'm not mistaken. Just a really good group. Brian Cook is going to get opportunities now as well as a starter, with Justin Reed really being the veteran of the group. They're playing the safety position. But the ability to move those 3 corners around and put them really wherever and just focus on matchups is going to be so important to their development. They even got good depth when you look at the bench. Joshua Williams, drafted last year, still quite good. They got Darius Rush from the Colts. I don't know why the Colts let him go, but they got Rush, Nick Jones as other corner depth out there. So it's such a young group of corners and secondary guys. Mike Edwards, I think, has the most time in the league out of anyone. Maybe it's him and Justin Reed, I think, going for that. I think Justin Reed's been maybe got a year or 2 on him. But Chamari Connor is going to be your safety / corner. DiCaprio Boodle, who they decided to keep, is going to be like a special teams guy for the most part. But it's such a young and intriguing group, and they already have, I'd say, 3 guys who have established themselves as starters. So you can get Joshua Williams, Darius Rush, probably Nick Jones, get those 3 guys competing, and you could end up with 4 guys who are really good, really young on these like cheap day 3 contracts, except for Trent McDuffie, who's going to be on his first round pick. If they extend L'Jarius Sneed, if they haven't already, then I think he'll get some pretty good money for a cornerback as well. They'll want to keep this group together. But I haven't seen a group this young in a long time, and they confidently have built this group, and it really speaks to Spagnuolo being able to take these guys with such little experience and make them as effective as he has. And unlike any other group of starting 5 defensive backs that I've showed, this might be the most balanced one. You see Brian Cook is actually quite good against the run. Justin Reed, a little bit better against the pass as he gets a little older. The run game, the physicality aspect, maybe leaving him a little bit, but not even significantly. Watson and McDuffie serviceable as corners and defensive backs in the run game. Sneed has actually been really good in that aspect of playing the position. Could allow you to bump him maybe inside, even though that's sort of what they feel and projecting Trent McDuffie's major role to be. But even with some of the depth, Joshua Williams really showed that he could play against the run there. DiCaprio Boodle, great special teams guy, so he's going to give you some tackling ability. They really do lose some of the depth perspective projections, with some of these rookies against the run. But having defensive backs play well against the run, it's not as significant. You obviously want guys who aren't afraid to do that, but I think you've got 4 guys that play cornerback that you can put on the field in any situation. You're going to get some sort of quality out of them in both aspects of the game. And I think that's another thing that joins this group with the linebacking group, is that you don't really have anyone, like you have good depth where you got guys on the bench that are going to be able to go in there and play, and you're not going to lose a whole lot in either against the pass or against the run. And that's really important for this defense to have. So we take a look at the positional summary, and like I was saying, the edge room is a concern, mostly against the run. The interior, the defensive line, really in general, is my concern. You got not having Chris Jones significantly will change what this group looks like. And when Charles Omenihu comes back, I think you'll get an instant upgrade to the edge room. But I think that the front four is going to be a real weak spot of this team, even when Chris Jones returns, until you're really at full strength there, or somebody proves me wrong otherwise and breaks out. So overall, it's my 17th defense in the league, 15th against the pass, 24th against the run. And with Chris Jones out, they're probably not in the top 20. I think that's pretty obvious. He makes that much of a difference to this team. But also, when you're in this situation, like I said, teams are going to have to throw against you because Kansas City really does a great job of dictating the pace of a game and dictating the terms of a game. So it's going to be passing games when you play them. So the poor run defense is not necessarily going to come into play, hopefully, as much as it would for a middle-of-the-pack team. So just taking a look at their schedule, and I got them going 15-2, which is the best record in the AFC. I got them losing to Denver on the road and then to Buffalo late in the year. I think that looking at some of these other games, they play Philadelphia, they do play Miami and the Jets. So they do have a bit of a gauntlet. They play Cincinnati as well. They got to play Denver twice, got to play the Chargers twice. They got to play Jacksonville, Detroit in week 1. So now, what will this record look like if Chris Jones doesn't play for, say, the first 4 weeks, first half of the season? Let's say the first half of the season. How much does this change what they will be doing? Now I look at a team like the Jets on the road. They're going on the road to the Jets with a team that can run the football. Dalvin Cook, Breece Hall, Michael Carter, Israel Abanikanda. Like, they got the running game down. That could be an issue. A game against Chicago could become an issue because of how well they're going to run the ball. I don't know that it significantly changes anything other than that. They might pick up a third loss in that scenario. Of course, they could pick up that third loss against Philadelphia as well. But there's not, maybe against Cincinnati, because Cincinnati is so good. But I just don't foresee or project too many losses here, especially because they're so good at coming back. And so I just think that they're so head and shoulders above some of these other teams that even with some deficiencies, their offense is going to operate at such a higher level that they could probably afford to have some defensive efficiencies in the short term. And here's the summary: 15-2, first in the West, in the AFC West, first in the AFC, second in the league with the best coaching staff, third total offense, best passing offense by far, and then like a middle of the pack defense that's just good enough that it allows their offense to function at such a level where this team is going to be dominating games. And their defense is going to be put in situations because of their offense to play to their strengths, which is pass defense. And there it is, my number 2 team in my 2023 NFL Deep Dive Series, the Kansas City Chiefs. Like the video and leave a comment if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the future videos, which will, down the line now, include my number 1 team reveal, which, process of elimination. And then mock drafts going forward, some analysis throughout the year. But it's all very exciting, and we're almost at the end here of this deep dive series, so I really appreciate you guys for being here. Hope to see you guys for the number 1 video. And if the number 1 video has been released, it'll be right there. If not, it'll be the number 3 video. and then the playlist will be on the other side. So enjoy, thank you, and I'll see you next time.